So, welcome to Leading with GenAI, the podcast where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the business world. And today we're going to be diving into some new hot topics again with Pat and Geoff, myself, Rob. We like to start with what's hot. And Pat and Geoff and I have been talking during the week. And I think one of the things we'd like to start with is around some stuff that caught your attention, Pat, on M&A and the impact for private equity investments.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think there's something interesting going on at the moment because I've been involved in buyouts in the 90s in telecoms and acquisition integration in the 2000s and private equity in the 2020s. And the thing that interests me right now is if you think about how long it takes to actually do a deal, it can be anything from 6 months to a year or whatever, to actually go through the due diligence and make that investment or acquisition. And now what's happening is we have this challenge where there's so much kind of productivity change and transformation that could be occurring within the target company, but also in the wider market around the target company, as well as customers and partners and all this kind of stuff. So any investor, whether it's private equity or whether it's a corporation looking to make an acquisition, they've got to factor all of this stuff in terms of what's going to be happening within that organization. So within 6 months, when I've got the deal, when the deal's been done, what you're actually buying could be completely different in terms of the market and the opportunity to what you originally planned to do. And then of course you've got to figure out how to accelerate it and all of the issues in terms of layering debt on top of the company and at the same time continuing that transformation in terms of productivity. So, that's a huge area of interest and opportunity. I don't know if you guys have some quick comments on that. We can dig in a bit deeper.
There's a whole ton of stuff to unpack there, really, Pat, isn't there? Where do we start at? I think it's a really good topic to bring up. That whole investment thing, I think, firstly, let's just pick off one of those ones to look at. For an established company that's maybe brought in a PE for scale-up reasons, or there's a PE come in to for other reasons as well, to buy out the original founders, perhaps. In terms of efficiencies, let's take a sort of mid-market size company, for example. The amount of efficiencies that you can find in there by using things like generative AI. The piece of work I did recently with a law firm, we found 750 hours a week that they spend on repetitive tasks. And this is just a small regional law firm here in the UK. And I think we could take that down by about 350 hours per week. Yeah. So what business impact that has is that you can, those fee earners can then generate more fees, spend more time with clients. You can improve the efficiency of a lot of your operational processes. You can redeploy staff onto better tasks, all of these kind of things. So there's an immediate win by using that in there from an investment perspective. And that's just one. I'll pause on that one.
Yeah, Rob, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. Like I say, as Geoff said, there's a lot to unpack there, Pat. And I think if we think about it almost like chronologically, right, for what Geoff was commenting on then was, how the operations of the business will change. So that means that fundamentally the valuation of the business is going to be different, right? Because, as we talked about before, you can do more with less. So maybe you should be driving profitability in that business, which means that the not so much the multiples changing, but the actual baseline of the EBITDA is going to change going forward. Yeah. But then when you mentioned the legal stuff, Geoff, I think for me, having been involved in quite a few cases of doing the due diligence, we often see a long time doing the financial due diligence, the legal due diligence, the technical due diligence, and if Pat's saying, look, that business might be fundamentally different in 6 months' time, why do we spend 3 months on due diligence, for example? Maybe we can spend a week on due diligence now, to how to populate their data room that much faster. Yeah. And, things like open banking, APIs, etc., to populate the data room. So again, sorry, there's a load for me to think about here as well, but I think due diligence is a great topic on its own. And then the actual valuation of the business is also interesting because investors are always interested in what the future is going to look like, the future exit valuation, and those metrics are all going to be very different.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a difference in the type of organization that investors, private equity are targeting. So, we're going to see this massive transformation around human capital. So services acquisition targets or buyout targets, I think that we're going to see a decline there. But what we might see actually is an increase in investments in, say, SMEs, for example, who actually manufacturing something or doing a bit of R&D, because what's coming along in the next few months probably is a lot more scientific mathematical capability in terms of new types of AI on top of the LLM capabilities that we've already got. And I think that we're going to see an acceleration, not just in terms of what these SMEs who actually produce something tangible can do, but also spin-outs from universities and research institutions and things like that. So I think we might see a lot more caution towards services investments and a lot more kind of aggressive activity targeting some of these manufacturing research type organizations.
Yeah, sure. I think on that due deal point, and just come around to the point you're making there, Pat, just pick up that due diligence one. I think a couple of things there. So generative AI has got an amazing role it can play in doing due diligence. You can really speed up that kind of research. Just really, I mean, if anyone's tried this, I'd recommend doing it. It's really interesting to go and take your website address, for example, or a company you're interested in, put it into a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or something, and ask it to go and compare it to 3 or 4 other competitors, or produce a list of competitors to this business, and you can really speed up that whole due deal research, competitor research, and that's just one bit of it. And there's always the thing with Gen AI, isn't it? Is it's I think I wrote a blog about this a few weeks ago. It's about the long tail. It's all those little tasks that you can use it to speed up. And with that due deal bit, I was chatting to a good friend of mine as a lawyer, and she acted for me on the sale of my company last year. And she was saying, one of the things she said this would be amazing for is, if you've been through this, you have to do these disclosures. So you have to go through and state all of these things, and it's a legal piece of work, and it can come back at you, all the warranty and disclosures when you sell the company. You're warranting the things you have and haven't done and all of that kind of stuff. And she said it's really, really difficult because she's got to be scribbling down all of these notes, exactly what the sellers said and what disclosures they made, what warranties they've given. She said, I'm always worried I'm going to miss something. And she said, using transcription with generative AI, she said, it's just brilliant. I'll have an original transcript and I can get it to summarize it for me. And then I can just go back and cross-reference the summary to make sure it's correct. And that'll speed up the whole process of actually selling a company and getting all that kind of work done in there. But just on this due deal bit, something I'm really fascinated by at the moment is I think this is a really dangerous time to be a startup, because we don't know what use cases Gen AI is going to be able to take on, but it's taking on more and more things. And a good example of that is recently I was at a angel investor demo day, and there was a company there who had a really neat bit of technology. So the real short version of it is try and think of something like Google Glass, so like a pair of glasses. It was for the aerospace sector, and their pitch was that engineers would wear these glasses, and as they were working on, say, an engine on a big passenger jet, it would identify it's that part of the engine, and it'd automatically go and look up the right page in the manual and transpose that onto a screen in front of the engineer, so he'd know exactly what he's looking at. It's really good. You can absolutely see the use case for it. You look at the total addressable market; it must be massive if you think of number of airliners which are out there. And then about 2 weeks later, I saw that ChatGPT 4.0 demo day where they demonstrated that bit of technology where, they're moving the phone around and it's describing what it's seeing in front of them. So that company's business model has just fundamentally changed or disappeared, because surely you would just take that maintenance manual for your passenger jet and train ChatGPT up on it, and then you could just use some kind of wearable technology or something to interface those two together. And there's so many examples like this, isn't it? Is that there's an established business that's there, and then suddenly ChatGPT moves into that space, or Gemini or somebody else moves into that space and can do all of these kind of things. So due diligence, I think I'd be really concerned if I was an investor to say, this might be a viable business today, but are they about to have their lunch eaten?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how many organizations are, or how many investment firms are actually in the middle of a process of that kind of due diligence for that type of organization that is either getting disrupted by ChatGPT 4.0, or, as you say, Geoff, the boundary is going to get pushed out in terms of what it can do in the next iteration. So, yeah, there could be a lot of money at stake there. Yeah. The other, Rob, did you want to say anything? Because I have one more thing
just
on this.
I wanted to respond to Geoff, and I have to be careful because we're working in that space almost exactly as you described a moment ago. So I have to be a little bit careful what I say.
You're going to be making a phone call straight after we've recorded this, aren't you?
Yeah. But what I would say is that
am I supposed to be recording this?
I'll give some general observations about this. So I think there's two things. One is, are you an enabling technology provider? So are you going in and enabling someone to be able to use the augmented reality to be able to allow the clients that you sell the solution to do remote maintenance, to be able to consult with a expert engineer in another country, for example, so that you can have the less trained engineer locally, etc., working on the maintenance of the aircraft, or the air conditioning system in a building, or the maintenance of an EV car where, let's face it, the mechanics aren't up to speed yet. We're working on those things, or something exotic, where you'd have to fly the mechanic in to fix it for you. And now, obviously, with the augmented reality, we can do that. So a company selling the technology that enables that, that's one area that you might think, well, that's an opportunity. But then what about the companies that who are actually offering the aircraft engineer services, etc.? Will they see an increased level of competition because they don't need to have so many, they don't need to fly things in and out, for maintenance. They can have people remotely working. So it's very disruptive in a lot of areas. There's threats and opportunities for everybody. And I think whenever we look at GenAI and augmented reality and metaverse and all of these things, it's really, how do we embrace the opportunity on it, and how do we change our business to make sure it isn't turning into a threat?
Yeah. On this M&A subject, I just have one other thing, and that was around leadership. So very often you have investors, private equity, who once they've made the investment or the deal's been done, they like to sometimes fly in their own management, new management, to actually scale the business, make it more profitable, grow the revenue faster. But the challenge here now is that you need to bring in someone, or you need to keep hold of the people who are in there that really understand the impact of this generative AI on the various elements of workflows and what's going on in and around the marketplaces and your partnerships and technology and things like that. So you can't just bring in someone who's kind of a financial engineer or an operations guy. You really need someone who can take advantage of all of the, harness the wind and the waves, if you like. So I think that's going to be a key focus area for investors, is making sure that they really have a solid team in place to actually exploit this going forward, exploit this investment, and drive those returns for their own investors as well.
I want to just steer this conversation a little bit at the moment, because I think we've got two things. We've got companies that are creating AI solutions. What you're talking about, Geoff, with the AR, that could also be for telemedicine and all the rest of it, and those companies go and sell those services. The other thing, which is, I think, more about this impact on M&A and private equity investments in existing, say, established companies, as you say, a management buyout by PE or something. How about how's that going to work in terms of understanding and doing the due diligence to see the impact of GenAI on those businesses? And I want to open this up now to the other topic that you'd suggested for today, Pat, as well, which is the mindset of the board. So you've got an existing business, not an AI business, but an existing business that needs to adopt AI or needs to understand what's going on. So maybe we can open that up in terms of the mindset of the board and how to change that mindset of the board, or what do you both see as the status of the boards at the moment?
Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bare minimum that every board has got to do is to say, this is a highly impactful transformational technology. We have to have some sort of strategy there that shows us how it's going to impact our business. And you've got to get that together very, very quickly. Obviously, got to be very careful not just to go off and bring in consultants who write you a massive, great big PowerPoint deck that doesn't tell you anything that's particularly useful. This is really getting it down to, and this is the kind of stuff I'm particularly interested in. So, of course, I'm going to say about this is really drilling into, where do we spend lots of time? Where are lots of sort of like repetitive tasks is one area to go and look at, and what could we identify there that's going to help us improve our business? Yeah, so that's one. The other is looking at things like customer touch points. If we've got, depending on what type of business you are, if you're a B2C, then there's enormous opportunities for GenAI to help you touch and those customer touch points and engage your customers much, much better through all kinds of things, not just the obvious chatbots. So, that's the first thing I think every board has got to do, is very quickly get there just at a high level to say, how could we use this technology? How is it going to make our business better, improve our customers' lives, improve our profitability, and so on? That's the first bit, I think. And if you haven't done that in the next probably 3 to 6 months, then your competitors will have done, and you're going to be well behind the curve.
Yeah. One of the other challenges for boards and board members is, of course, they sit on many different companies and often across different industries, and all of those different companies in the industries might be going through different levels of productivity performance improvements resulting from generative AI across different workflows and functions, whether it's sales and marketing or R&D or operations, this kind of thing. And so it's going to be very important that they get a very solid understanding from the leadership team about what's going on and how there could be dramatic swings in terms of performance, profitability, costs, opportunities, as well as risks over the coming 6-month period. Traditionally, before November 2022, everyone was making these 5-year strategy roadmaps and this kind of thing, or 2-year financial roadmaps. But now, of course, it's got to be a lot more fluid and loose. And but one of the interesting things I've seen, especially from a lot of US-based organizations, is the boards are actually taking, we all spend a lot of time in senior leadership teams preparing decks that then go to the board, and then they read, and then you go to the board meeting and they ask you questions. But now what a lot of the US teams, and maybe some around the world, are doing is actually feeding those preparation decks into an AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or something else, and actually using and interrogating it and actually trying to figure out what questions should they be asking the leadership team in that very short space of time when they all come together for the board meeting. And on the other side of the equation, the leadership teams are also trying to use these AIs to figure out what kind of questions the board will be interested in asking and how they should respond. So actually, you've got this dynamic where both sides are starting to actually use the AI to drive more efficient conversation at the board meetings as well.
That's a really interesting point. Sorry, Rob, that's a really interesting point there, Pat. I really like that. It's just to basically take your current board deck, your reporting packs and that kind of stuff, and feed that. Obviously, we'll caveat this, say, make sure it's done securely, and you're thinking of privacy here, because there's going to be a lot of confidential information in that. But feed that into some sort of large language model and get it to give you insights and analysis of what questions should they ask. And that's a perfect use case for things like ChatGPT and other LLMs. Yeah. Sorry, Robert.
I was just going to say, this is a change management thing, and interesting observation is that from what you're both saying, I think this is all of the board members, all of the leadership team, all of the different departments need to embrace this and get to know it. But then you notice in the press, I think this was a few weeks ago, and Pat, you pointed this one out to me. I think it was the Biden administration that basically said every government agency in the US had to appoint, I can't remember what they call them, a czar, we'd call it in the UK, but the chief of AI. Now, I just wonder if that's the right way to do it. Of course, it's good to have a champion and, someone to sponsor it. But this reminds me a little bit of when companies would appoint a chief data officer or business analytics person. It means that it doesn't necessarily mean that the CFO wants to work with that person or the CTO wants to work with that person. It has to be a very collaborative approach. Maybe an individual can help drive that, but I think it runs deeper than that.
Geoff, you got anything on that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, actually, I just sort of segue off slightly on that. I completely agree with you. I mean, it's one of those things of creating a person, and the CDO is a good example, is it, that chief data officer. If you don't give them a clear mandate, you don't give them, objectives as to why you're doing this or a purpose, you just got a job title, haven't you? And then actually this neatly links into something that I saw the other day. This report, well, I'm sure we'll put this in the show notes, is this CIO Dive reported on this survey around people who are concerned around that as staff members start to use GenAI, they're going to free up loads of time, right? That's a given. We know that. We've all seen it. What are they going to do with that time? Where do they redeploy it? And one of the things that they found was that this survey felt that, or indicated that what staff would do is probably put it onto the wrong tasks. Yeah, so they'd start just doing more administrative type tasks rather than helping more clients, generate more feeds, cut more code, whatever their main job function is. And I thought this is really interesting to read through and think on, because how do we make sure that as we bring these tools into organizations, that you've got that sort of cultural change that comes through there? How do we make sure that people are doing the right things? And to your point you're making there about collaboration, one of the things I think is a really effective way is to make sure you've got these kind of, I come from the cloud migration business. We used to have these cloud centers of excellence. So you would share information around. Mm-hmm. So you want this kind of forum internally. And what I always advise clients to do is make sure as you bring these tools in, you have a forum, comes together at least monthly, maybe more frequently. And everybody just sits there and just shares things they've done. I used it to summarize and transcribe these meetings. I use it to look at my emails. I did data analysis, whatever it is, and get the team talking rather than external consultants coming in and telling you how to use these tools. It's your own team, guided probably by the likes of us, to come in and guide you through and identify and get people talking about ways to do it and sharing all of that corporate knowledge. But I wonder, and I'm interested in you guys' thoughts on this, is how do you set objectives for staff to say, okay, if you're going to free up loads of your time, how do we measure that and make sure you're using it on the right things without doing some kind of big brother type thing where you suddenly put all these extra KPIs on people?
Yeah, I think it depends on the function. And if you're in the project services business, for example, then you can start thinking about, well, how does that change, say, the critical path in the project? And do I really have some big chunks of capacity that I can then feed into my resource management system, and I actually have a stack of customer projects that have been signed and ready to go, and I freed up a bunch of resource. But if you're in a different function, maybe it's not customer facing, it might be a slightly different kind of angle. I think, I think the thing with this generative AI is kind of leveling all of us up. So actually what we're going to be doing going forward will be much more higher level, higher value tasks. And it might actually allow some of us to move between what we call traditional functions, because you have this capability that can actually help you do some of the more technical work that you might have spent years trying to absorb and learn. But now actually you don't need that. So you can actually float around the organization or become part of a more generic resource pool.
I like what you guys are saying, and I think the idea of having someone who can help facilitate center of excellence, bringing everyone together to talk about what's working well and maybe not what's not working so well. And I think in terms of the KPIs, maybe taking a really holistic view on the KPIs is, I think, what you're both saying as well, because I think it'd be good to have some really pragmatic KPIs in place. So, for example, you can see if you're working in customer service or software development or sales, it's how many more actions where you're able to do, what's the outcome, but also what's the quality of the outcomes of that? Did you get more leads? Did you get more conversions? Did you get more customer satisfaction? Actual real measurements around that side of the business, which we're all used to. But what about other aspects like employee well-being and staff retention? And what we talked about on the last podcast is like people will want to go to a 3-4 working day week. They'll still need to be paid the same. We can talk about universal credit or whatever it might be, but we're looking at outcomes. So I'd love to see in the coming podcasts as we go, with the work that we do with different companies out there, especially you both, advising the boards and seeing what's going on in those companies, to be able to come back and say, these were the tangible, measurable benefits for the business, for the employees, for the customers, for society. Yeah.
Just coming back to that chief AI point, I'm on the fence about, do we need another chief in the management team? I think, I'll give you an example, actually. I was working with, for a number of years, quite recently, I was working with a head of people and culture and a chief HR officer, and she was immediately onto this generative AI thing as soon as it kind of came out. And she absorbed it, and she was evangelizing about it and thinking about it strategically across the organization, both in terms of her own kind of strategic workflows, but also how it impacted the services organization. And I think we need all of the current forms of management in the different functions. They actually need to start absorbing it and thinking about how it's going to, change their own specific workflows and increase productivity, and how that's going to bubble up across the organization as a whole.
I'm going to stop you there, Pat, for a minute, because we do this a lot as like consultants. We talk about workflows, etc. I think the reality is we need to be, yes, you said the word specific, but we need to be specific. So if it's marketing, these are the tools you should be using. If it's sales, these are the tools you should be using. If you're, do clinical trials or some sort of R&D or productivity, actually giving people real named practical tools. I'd love to explore that in the future podcasts, so that we're not just talking about what the three of us can talk about all day long, management waffle almost, and really specific things. Sure. That proof is in the pudding, right? I use that tool and now I've automated my emails or whatever it might be, and I think all those little things will build up to a really big.
I think you found a theme for another episode there, Rob. Definitely, there is a whole half an hour or more we could talk about all that, because it's this whole idea, isn't it? Is GenAI going through organisations? Is it going to come bottom up and bubble its way, or is it going to be forced top down?
Yeah.
My feeling is it's more going to come up from the bottom, but you need some sort of standards in there in a larger organisation, especially to make sure that people are doing it safely, securely.
Oh, standards as well. That's another great topic for the future. So I think in the interest of time, I think there's one other thing that we kind of wanted to mention today, which was...
sorry, Rob, can I just interrupt you there? Because I'm in the flow. We're all in the flow. And there was just one other area that kind of tied together the first subject, which was M&A, and the second one, which was board. And that is, if you think about much of the board activity is often thinking about, should we make an acquisition or should we make investments in the future? And I think that if you've got all of this productivity, extra capacity that's bubbling up and it's being understood by the senior leadership team and discussed with the board, that could change the mindset in terms of, do we really want to make this acquisition in the future, in the next 6 months or next year? Or do we want to actually double down on R&D or a partnership with someone else to actually drive our strategy? So I think those two things are going to come together.
Cool. So, Geoff, you noticed an article during the week on CIO die story related to using Slack, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what we were just talking through. So I think we put that in the show notes. I think we've kind of covered that enough. It's the devil makes work for idle thumbs problem, which I don't think we'd really thought about before with GenAI. But yeah, no, if you pop it in the show notes, and people should have a read through it. It's got an interesting little thought to go on.
Great. Well, we'll share that. So, I think we're coming onto the hour, and I think we're scheduled. We all got busy things to do today. So I just want to thank you both. Really interesting discussions. Loads of new topics for going up in the future. Pat's going to ignore the midday deadline and go for it, Pat.
I got one more thing. I was on the way to the gym this morning in the car, and I was listening to a podcast, AI for Humans, and on YouTube, and they were demoing this new Sono generative AI where you can, create songs and now sound effects. And I'll put a link to it here in the video. It's hilarious, but it's also very, very interesting and informative. So that's one specific application to keep an eye on.
Love it.
Sorry, Rob.
Love it. One specific thing. And I hope when you edit, when you go to press, well, we don't edit, when you go to press this and publish it, you can show off those sound effects to good use in the outro. And the outro is, thanks for tuning in to Leading with GenAI, and keep innovating and leading the way.
Cheers, Geoff. Cheers, Rob.
Thanks all. Catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.